Okay, so maybe if you can just put your hands up and let me know that you can see my screen, that would be awesome. Beautiful. Rightio. So the first thing we're going to talk about today, and the reason I didn't go on video camera, by the way, is because I'm hoping that I'm the only one here in a pair of fluffy slippers and a pajamas. So it's 8 p.m. here. So hope you're having a wonderful day. Anyway, let's get stuck into it. So this first process is designed to look for URLs that are currently HTTP, but there is an alternative that is not broken or anything like that. Like it's a valid alternative that's a HTTPS. If the system finds that, it will, with this process, it will actually upgrade the ad for you. So it will rename, or actually remove the old ad and recreate the new ad with the HTTPS. So it's just a nice, neat way to go through and sort of clean up accounts that might have a whole bunch of old HTTP landing pages where you know that they've got some HTTPS, but it's just a bit of a pain to go through and work out which one's which. So you can let the system do it. It ignores product ads and the old text ads, because obviously we don't have URLs in product ads, and text ads you can't change anyway, so just ignores those. But everything else, so that's image ads, text ads, everything else will get changed here. So now this process, I'm going to share this process after the webinar, so you'll have access to this. And you can, if you want to, you can run this part automatically, or you can tell it to send them to the Action Center, which is probably not a bad idea for the first couple that you run, just to make sure that it's doing all the right things. And if it's not, let me know, and we'll go through and work out if it's a bug or if it's a logic problem. But so that's the idea behind the HTTPS upgrade. So if anyone's got any questions, could they just go in the chat and write some questions in the chat, and I'll read them, and I'll read them out to the group, and then we can cover off on them before we move on to shopping. And the same goes with, if you've got any questions, by the way, as we're going through, just type them in the chat, and we'll stop and have a look at that question. Otherwise, we've got a Q&A at the end. But if you see something sort of, and we're right in the middle of it, just put your hand up and ask the question. Awesome. No questions on that? Excellent. All right, moving on. Let's go to our beautiful little PowerPoint here. So what we're looking at here with shopping and DSA campaigns, as you know, we can see the search query reports. And the idea behind this particular process is to essentially scrape shopping campaigns or DSA campaigns, or both, to look for search queries that are really good quality search queries that you can start advertising on the search network with search ads. So, so this particular process, really, we need to have a process that, first of all, looks for the search queries that you determine are really good quality search queries. Then we need a search campaign to pop those search queries into. And we need a way to show relevant ads to all these search queries that you're dropping into the search campaign. Now, there is actually a way to do this, and I know some of you actually do something similar to this already, so this may hopefully give you a few extra tips. But for those people that haven't seen this before, this is a real game changer in terms of being able to build out a search campaign based on search queries that have converted really well up at shopping level or DSA. And the beautiful thing about this whole process is you can actually do all of this completely automatically. So scraping the search queries, adding them into your search campaign, making sure that the ads are relevant and that the landing pages are relevant for the keywords, all that stuff can be done automatically just with a simple little hack. So we're going to go through that. But first of all, let's start from the beginning and have a look what needs to happen in terms of getting this set up and ready for success. So the first thing you need to do is to actually build your search campaign. So just build a simple search campaign obviously with your targeting and stuff that you need. and just put one ad group in this search campaign to start with. So you can see here I've got my search campaign. I've just called it _SEA from shopping queries, just so I know what it's about. And then I've got one ad group, which I've called bucket queries from shopping campaign. And so I call it bucket because then I can, excuse me, I can actually call out this naming protocol in a process if I want to. So, and then I sort of know that this is the ad group that all those search queries are going to go into from the beginning. So there might be 300 or 400 or 500, even thousands of keywords that end up going into the bucket here, all scraped from your shopping and your DSA campaigns. So that's step one. Set this up manually in AdWords. Very simple. Doesn't take very long. The next thing to do is to jump into the client's website and find the search bar and search for a product that you know they have. So in this case, this guy sells like floral supplies. So we would type in a product we know they've got, wet floral foam. So we've typed that in and it's given us a heap of results. But the important thing here is we want to look at this search string up the top. And so we'll note here that we've got the normal URL. Then the rest of it is unique to this site or their cart. So different sites and carts will have different structures here. So this is not always going to be exactly the same. But for this client, this is the format that we get when we do a search. And so what we want to do is we want to copy this URL, and then we go across to where you can create some ads in your ad group. So create a new text ad, and the final URL you want for that text ad is basically you just paste that URL in that we just copied, and then replace the search string with the curly bracket keywords. So we're putting in the dynamic keyword insertion where the search string was in the URL. So if we just go back to here, this is the bit, wet plus floral plus foam. That's the bit there that we're replacing with the curly bracket keyword. And so what that will effectively do, we'll have one ad or a couple of ads if you want to do some ad testing, but in this case we're just doing one. So we'll have one ad here that has dynamic keyword insertion in the URL. So when a keyword triggers that we're bidding on in this new search bucket, and there could be 500 keywords, remember. So if any one of those keywords triggers, then the landing page that the user will get sent to will be replicating as if that user had have gone to the website and done a search on the website. So they should always, depending on the quality of the search, they should always end up on a page that is relevant for that particular search. So it's a good sort of first step and saves you having to write hundreds and hundreds of ads for all of these keywords that you're finding, because a lot of these keywords may not have a lot of volume. And so, so this is a really good way to be able to, I guess, create a big testing ground very easily and very quickly without having to write heaps and heaps of ads. So that's where we get the URL from. So the next part of creating the ad is basically just filling in the rest of the bits of your ad, but using dynamic keyword insertion where appropriate. Now, personally, I've found that headline 1 always seems to work pretty well. So something like that, using obviously a fallback text, just in case your keyword happens to be a really long one. So for me, I find a good format is put it once in the headline, put it once in a path, and stick it in the first line of the description somewhere. So that tends to, in my opinion, form pretty good looking ads. You're not keyword stuffing or anything like that, and you can generally make it sound pretty normal and sort of fluid. So that way you've got sort of 3 DKIs in there, plus you've got the keyword in the URL. So that ad should, unless the keyword's super long, should read fairly well for the customers when they look at it. So moving on. So now what the situation we're in now is we've got a campaign that we've built. We've got one ad group in there, which is a bucket ad group. That ad group has 1 or more DKI ads, depending on how many you set up. And now it's ready to start accepting keywords from the DSA and the shopping campaigns. Once you set up your budgets and targeting and all that stuff. So basically get it ready at this point to start firing ads. And in a second, I'll show you how to, or the process that we use to scrape the search queries and start adding them into the ad group. All right. Oh, the other thing is that when we're building this process, I find it more effective if we just use exact match keywords that we add into this bucket ad group. So the way we do this is we build a new search query campaign. So this is a search query campaign here, or search query process, sorry, where we use, a lot of people don't know this actually exists, but you can use an option in here now, and this is only fairly new, where you can actually select new campaigns that contain some sort of naming protocol. So for me, I use _SHO, but you could have shopping or whatever else you normally use in your shopping campaigns as a naming protocol. Put that in here, and it means that by default then it will only select those campaigns. So in this case, the 2 shopping campaigns that I've set up for this particular example. Now, the benefit about using this is that, let's say I open up a new shopping campaign tomorrow, then this process will automatically attach that shopping campaign in this tree here. So it will tick it as it comes in, it will see it and it will say, yes, it contains _SHO. So it will tick it automatically. So you don't need to maintain the campaigns in the selection tree here. It's done automatically using your naming protocol here. So that's pretty neat. Anyway, so then we move on to actually building the search query process. Now, this can be a little bit fluid as to what you want to see before a search query is picked up and added into your search campaign. So the example that I've used here is I want to make sure that I've got volume, I've got conversions, and my conversions are producing an ROI that is better than target. So how I've structured this, I have said I want at least 15 impressions. Well, actually, it's greater than 15 in the last month. But I've told the system that I want that to be campaign aggregated. So what that means is that it's going to look right across the whole campaign at the search query that it's currently assessing. And the benefit about going campaign aggregated is it means that it will look at all instances of that search query right across the whole campaign, all the ad groups, all that stuff, and it will aggregate the data for all those individual search queries right across the whole campaign. And then if at an aggregate level, at the campaign level, that search query has greater than 15 impressions in the last month, the answer will be yes, and it will move on to the next step. So it's a really neat way, particularly for shopping, to make sure that you're not sort of missing out on some search queries because you might have search queries spread across 5 different ad groups. When you aggregate them, you know, they do meet the criteria, but when you look at them individually at the ad group level, they may not meet the criteria independently. So this means they can't hide anywhere. I do the same with conversions here. I've just said I want at least 2 conversions. Again, campaign aggregated, so it doesn't matter which ad groups. I might have had 5 ad groups and 2 of those had 1 conversion each. So in that case, this would still trigger for that search query. So as long as the search query across the campaign has had 2 or more search query conversions, then the answer to this one will be yes, and it will move on to the next question. Now, I've got a little formula in here, and I'm happy to share that formula if anyone's interested, but essentially it's asking, look, when I aggregate the ROI, again, across the campaign, for all instances of this search query that I'm currently assessing, is that aggregated ROI better than target? If the answer is yes, then it moves to the next step, which is adding the search query as a keyword into the bucket ad group. Now, you don't have to have these steps. You can have different steps. You can have different criteria completely. It doesn't really matter as long as you have something here that makes sense to you and that you're happy to use it as your scraping trigger to grab those search queries and put them down into the bucket. Because what we want to do is to make sure that these search queries that come down here are very, very good quality, so we can do this step here automatically. And I'll show you the settings in this add to bucket ad group now. So these are the settings here that that I've got set up in this case. So I've said I want to add as a keyword to custom ad groups. Just tick the bucket ad group, that's fine. I only want exact match keywords, and I'm using ad group default bids. Again, you don't have to use ad group default if you don't want to. I just find for this particular structure, it works really neatly because it saves you having to worry about where your keyword bid levels and stuff are. So I've just got a question come through. This is an excellent question from Den, thank you. How can you ensure that only new search queries, i.e. those that are not present as keywords somewhere else in the account, are extracted and added from the DSA shopping campaign? So essentially you're asking Den, look, if I've already got the keyword somewhere else, I don't want to add it, but if it's not in my account already, then I do want to add it. And that's the question, which is an excellent question. Luckily for me, I just happen to have the answer to that on the very next slide. So you've read my mind, Den. Now, these options here, they include this last one, which is process search query, even if it exists elsewhere in the account. So if I have that unticked, it basically means if it exists somewhere else in the account, just ignore the search query. So if you have your options set like this, so they're all blank, then it means that it will only take a search query and add it into the bucket if it's a brand new keyword that doesn't actually exist somewhere else as an exact match keyword. It could be a different match type, but if there's no exact match variant, then it will add it into the bucket. So thank you for that question, Den. That was a beautiful lead into this slide. All right, so I haven't done anything else here, and I just tick run automatically because I'm pretty confident that my criteria are awesome. So I'm very happy for those search queries to come through. Rightio, so let's go to our next slide here. So this is the end of part one, where we have effectively worked out a way to scrape shopping and or DSA. Doesn't matter, it can be one or both, but we've worked out a way that we can scrape those search queries, only find brand new keywords, drop those into a search campaign, into an ad group where we know that the ads are reasonably relevant enough at least to at least start bidding on the keyword and getting impressions and getting clicks. So that whole process, you can run all of that totally automatically. The only manual bit really is setting up the search campaign and the ad group, and that's it. So that's super easy to manage. So now I've seen a lot of agencies actually do this and then they just leave it. They don't actually take this next step that we're going to talk about, which means that this can be a largely automated, I guess, a scraping mechanism to build out a search campaign. The next steps though, if you want to start taking that next step, is you can set up a process in PPC SAM that will scan that bucket and look for keywords that are really high volume. So they're getting lots and lots of impressions. If it finds those keywords, you can, if you use SCAGs, you can actually grab that keyword and cut and paste it out into a brand new SCAG automatically. That's no problem. And then you can flag it so to let you know that it's time to go and write an ad for this high volume keyword. If you don't use SCAGs and you do use BMM exact or some other form of alpha beta type structure or any other structure really, it's more efficient, I find, to manually grab that keyword and place it into exactly the right ad group, rather than trying to do some sort of fancy word matching and trying to set up a process to push it into a particular ad group. I just find it's easier and quicker just to grab the odd keyword that pops up as a result of this next search that I'm going to show you on the next slide, and just manually place it in the right ad group. And then you can then you could actually go as far as creating BMM versions of the keyword as well, if it's a high volume exact. So that next process that I've been playing around with, and again, this is not saying this is the only way to do it, this is just the way that I'm currently doing it, is essentially we have a keyword level process because we want to look at the keyword results that are in the bucket. And I've got the bucket campaign selected in the settings here. And the first question is, I only want to look at keywords that are in the bucket ad group. So if I've got a whole bunch of SCAGs or a whole bunch of alpha beta type ad groups sitting in underneath that same campaign, which is totally fine, then those will be ignored, because at this point I'm just interested in bucket keywords. Then I've got this nice little goodie here, which is a filter, which we actually find a lot of people don't even realize this exists, but you can use these things to filter for, like what I've got here, for example. Say I only want to look at, out of the bucket, I only want to look at or consider the top 20% of keywords based on impressions for that ad group. So what that would do is, let's say I've got like 1,000 keywords in there. This filter would say, well, order them by priority based on impressions, and only consider for the next steps, like passing through here, only consider the top 200 based on impressions, which is really neat, because it means that you can really genuinely do some of the 80-20 type activities that mean that you're not wasting time spending time looking at stuff that's actually really not worth you doing it. So so that's what we've got there, but there's all sorts of things you can do with filters. And in fact, on the next slide, I've got an example of the settings for this one, but it'll give you an idea of the flexibility of filters. So assuming then that our keyword passes through here, or we've found one that's actually in our top 20%, then we go and check to see whether the search query has got 200 or more impressions in the last 30 days. Now again, that's a pretty arbitrary figure. That's just a number for me. That means that this keyword is probably worth having a look at if I haven't already moved it on to a different ad group. So if it passes my little test here, I know that it's in the top 20% and that it's got a high level of baseline impressions. If I didn't have this in here, by the way, what would happen? Let's say I instantly added 1,000 keywords to this ad group, because I've got lots of volume, but they might all only have one impression each. So this filter would find, in that case, it would actually find 200 random keywords to push through, because they're all one impression. So it will come through to this level. And if I didn't have something like this hard-coded in, it means that I could potentially be seeing 200 results that are all one impression. So I don't want to waste my time looking at a one impression keyword. So that's why I've got this in here as well. So it's a combination of these two work together to make sure that you're only looking at stuff that's in the top 20% and they meet a certain minimum impression threshold. Then I've got this step in here, because if you think about what we're going to be doing with these keywords, we're very likely going to be grabbing them and moving them out to a different ad group somewhere, either a SCAG or a B&M exact or something. So once we've done that, we would actually pause the keyword in the bucket, because we've moved it and created it somewhere else. So once that's paused, we don't need to look at it again. So if it's paused, then we just ignore it. If, however, it does meet all of these criteria and it is still active in the bucket, then we want to do something with it. Now, because I use B&M exact, I don't have an automatic system here to flick that keyword out to a different ad group and pause the parent keyword and maybe label it and stuff like that. So I do that part manually, because it's actually fairly quick, because you don't get a lot of keywords that actually end up down here. But if you're doing SCAGs, there is an option in PPC SAM where you can copy to a different ad group. So you could say, if the keyword meets this criteria and you get to this point, you can say, grab that keyword, create a brand new SCAG, set the bids at XYZ, pause the parent keyword, label both of them if you want to, and go on your way. So you can actually do that totally automated if you want to use SCAGs. But yeah, so in my case, I don't. So I've just got an alert here to say, hey, you need to go and grab this keyword, pause it, and flick it into the appropriate ad group. So so that's the process that I'm currently using. And as I say, there could be different variations or different logic that might suit your circumstance. But as long as the outcome is there, that you've got some method of checking your keywords that are in this bucket, looking for really high volume keywords, that you can take them out and do something special with them. So that the reason of pulling them out, I think, is that they've got enough volume to warrant pulling out in the first place. So you spend a bit of time doing that, and spend a bit of time maybe rewriting the ads, making sure the ads are pointing to exactly the right landing page as opposed to a keyword insertion landing page, and maybe you might tweak the ads a little bit and that sort of stuff. So, plus it then gives you the option to manage the bids, particularly at that ad group. So that's the process. Here's the filter. So if I was to open up the filter, these are the sorts of options that we've got in the filter. So I can either select, say, a percentage or a number here. So I can say select the best 20% or 100% or whatever I want here in each. And there's a drop-down box here that says in the ad group, campaign, account, all those sorts of things, with the best number of impressions. But again, there's like 50 different metrics that you could choose from there if you want to filter for something special. Or the other option is you can say select all but the best 20% impressions, etc., etc. So you can sort of do a negative filter as well as a positive filter, which is really nice. And then pick your time period here. So that's pretty much it in terms of the shopping campaign, scraping and creating a search campaign out of it, and then what to do with it once it hits that point.